What's a Skinamarink? That was the first sentence that popped in my head the very first time I heard of this movie. Hello, and I'm from Pluto, and my name is Jamie, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm pretty sure the very first time I heard of Skinamarink was once again through another YouTube video that auto-played from my recommended feed. This time while I was probably playing Animal Crossing or something. But before I made this video you're watching now, I at least got the gist of it. If you were to have asked me to describe this film Skinamarink before I watched it, I would have said, okay, well, it's an experimental spooky movie about some kids who are just in the dark, and it's the 90s, and weird stuff keeps happening around the house, and it's kind of like a 90s kid liminal space spooky moment. My understanding was that it stylistically takes influence from a certain kind of nostalgia for some folks who'd lived during that time. For one thing, if you were alive and conscious in the 1990s and you wanted to watch a certain movie or show whenever you wanted, your most accessible option was to either buy or rent it on VHS and pop that sucker in a VCR. This ritual was most prevalent to me between the ages of 4 and 7, and for context, I turned 5 in 1999. Back then, if I was spending a weekend at Grandma and Grandpa's in the middle of a very foresty nowhere, an old Disney classic was most likely getting ingested at some point. Some tapes I remember being on regular rotation were Peter Pan, The Jungle Book, and The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Now, Skinamarink centers around 2 kids between the ages of 4 and 6, so when I was preparing to watch this film, I tried thinking back to when I was their age and how my mind worked back then. The perception of a young child forming their first memories is so impressionable and new to everything. Think about the very concept of just being a human being who lives on planet Earth. Regardless of where you live, it's a pretty big world out there, isn't it? Do you remember whenever you first realized just how big this planet is? I mean, it's a small world too. It's amazing how people can end up connecting in the most arbitrary ways. But when you're a small child, the world is just so vast and expansive and full of question marks, isn't it? For whatever reason, I was a strange little scaredy cat as a little kid. The scene in Ace Ventura 2 when Jim Carrey has to birth himself out of mechanical rhino would make me run out of the room screaming. Going back to one of the movies I mentioned that I used to watch a lot, The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. Now, I loved that tape, but I would never watch the ending. You see, the film contains a few different Winnie the Pooh stories blended together, one after the other. So at the very end, they added a very brief scene to serve as the conclusion to the whole feature. We see Pooh and Christopher Robin frolic off into the distance, and the shot pans out, transitioning from the animated 100 Acre Wood into a version simply illustrated in a book, that of which closes. The final shot is still, so still, this might as well just be a photograph. Sitting next to the book is the stuffed Winnie the Pooh bear, staring dead at the camera. The whimsical music pauses, then he winks. That scared the shit out of me when I was 4. Why did he wink? What does he know? Does he know me? Is the Pooh Bear in this videotape aware of my existence? Does he know where I live? Who my parents are? How many cats I have? Because if he does, what could he do with that information? If he can wink at me through a videotape, does that mean he can also move? Could he crawl out of the TV and get me? Well, I certainly didn't want to take that chance and let him find out. This wasn't the Pooh Bear I knew. This was an imposter. So from then on, every time I felt like watching that movie, as soon as Cartoon Pooh and Christopher Robin went off, so did the TV. I don't know, it was just like I was small and I guess aware that inanimate objects aren't actual living beings, so I made it disappear from my mind by preventing myself from ever seeing it again. I mean, look at it, it's like a jump scare for toddlers. Obviously, while it doesn't scare me at all anymore, it still looks kind of weird. I don't know why Pooh winked at me. I don't know why Jim Carrey had to birth himself out of a mechanical rhino's ass. I could not comprehend these things, so I was scared. I was 4. You ever been 4? You ever talked to a 3 or 4-year-old? They're a hoot. They say and do the craziest shit because their ever-growing brains thought of it and they just had to figure out a way to express it. By the way, I should clarify that I am in no way a child psychologist, just a former child. The imagination of a small child is just really eager to take in new information, true or false, since at that time we're still so new to the world and how it works. Again, very highly impressionable minds. So with the limited knowledge we'd have at that time, sometimes when things seemed perhaps a bit off, how do you go about trying to comprehend it? When something in your life changes, what do you make of it? When you're at an impressionable age, how much of what you perceive at that time, no matter how unusual the occurrence, can be assumed to be normal? And well, this could go for anybody at any age, but how much of what you fear could end up becoming true? Close your eyes and think of a time when you were a little kid and you wake up in the middle of the night. It's dark in your bedroom, and at first the darkness is dense and feels heavy, and if you were afraid of the dark, perhaps you could have been a little nervous, but your eyes adjust from the moonlight coming in from your bedroom window, your closet faintly visible from the other side of the room. There is not something watching me from within there, is there? Since I was clearly intrigued by the film's concept, let's answer the question from the beginning. What's a Skinamarink? Well, it's a movie. But first it was a song. In fact, I think it'd be amusing to define both of them for you at the same time because of how opposite they are in their descriptions. Just look at this list that popped up for me when I googled it. Skinamarink is a fun, action-oriented song for young children, often sung with simple hand gestures and movements. Skinamarink is a 2022 experimental horror film directed by Kyle Edward Ball. Skinamarink is a staple in the repertoire of the Canadian children's music trio Sharon, Lois, and Bram, who also have a TV show called Skinamarink TV. Skinamarink is a film that follows a young brother and sister who wake up during the night to discover their father is missing, and that the windows, doors, and other objects in their house are disappearing. Skinamarink is a song where the lyrics are nonsense, but the meaning is clear to children. Friendship, happiness, sharing, community, and love. Skinamarink is a movie which has been described as a waking nightmare. Obviously, the song and the movie aren't exactly related. Or are they? Okay, well, what are the lyrics to the song then? It's Skinamarink a dink-a-dink, Skinamarink a do. I love you. Skinamarink a dink-a-dink, Skinamarink a do. I love you. I love you in the morning and in the afternoon. I love you in the evening and underneath the moon. Skinamarink-a-dink-a-dink, Skinamarink-a-doo. I love you. Okay, yeah, that's pretty straightforward. Just a little feel-good ditty about love and friendship. Sure, I get it. And the name of the film, Skinamarink, does come from director Kyle Edward Ball's memory of the song from his childhood. And that's the cue to indeed talk about Mr. Ball, who wrote, directed, and edited Skinamarink, his feature film debut. He grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. After finishing film school, he started the YouTube channel BitesizedNightmares in 2015 and uploaded his first video, Nightmare 1, Contains Strobing, in 2017. The description says, "A nightmare I had when I was 8 years old. Describe a nightmare you had in the comments and I might film it." And indeed, that series went forth. People would leave comments detailing a dream they had, and Ball would pick one to make a short film out of. There are 39 total episodes of Nightmares, but they wouldn't be the only videos he'd upload to his channel. You can also find a few hours-long sound mixes meant to evoke certain types of atmospheres, as well as other videos on his channel not part of the Nightmare series, but one in particular, a short film called Heck. We're gonna want to highlight that before we get into Skinamarink. You see, while Ball was making the Nightmare videos, he began noticing a pattern among many different commenters who were sharing similar, specific elements in their individual dreams. The most common themes were, the person dreaming is a child, their parents are missing, and a monster is involved, and thus occurred the impetus for Skinamarink's conception. As Ball was developing the setting and narrative of his first full-length feature, he knew he wanted to make a horror film, quote, as personal and as quiet as possible, and something you would discover late at night, unquote. This brings us back to what I was rambling on about a bit ago, and experiencing a certain kind of nostalgia. Something akin to being a little kid, falling asleep, and then waking up in the middle of the night with the TV still on, and you have no idea what's happening on that screen. It could be paid programming, it could be an old sitcom rerun, etc. Either way, it's between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., a surreal time of night where the whole world is quiet except for that TV, gently talking at you while you're half conscious. And sometimes, after you're lulled back to sleep while Tim Allen's echoes in the distance, your dreams can take influence from what you'd just casually watched. Ball mentioned in an interview that he wanted Skinamarink to seem like how a small child would describe a dream they had the night before. Now, I gotta mention some of his influences because they are tied together in the realm of DIY filmmaking, each having their own unique individual styles. The three I'd like to highlight as future video topics are John Waters, Stan Brakhage, and Maya Deren. These three directors each had their own unique artistic styles that would result in intriguing and thought-provoking works. Brakhage and Deren were in particular noted for being contributors to avant-garde cinema, and I'm sure many of you have heard of at least one John Waters film, like Hairspray, Crybaby, and Pink Flamingos. With Ball's own DIY style of filmmaking, I can certainly see how these artists influenced him. Experimental film often prioritizes focusing on the emotion and atmosphere the artist or director wishes to convey with their work, rather than trying to center that around around a fixed plot. These works of art can sometimes require some semblance of audience participation, given that you're intrigued enough to want to look further into what you've just seen. Sometimes a film can require multiple watch-throughs to understand what's going on, or even pick up on some additional details you may have missed before. Sometimes you need to pause every now and then to try and figure out what the hell you're looking at. The way I'm describing this might sound a little bit simplified, or it could be totally bonkers, I don't know. But from discussions I've seen and heard of Skinamarink every now and then, it seems like while there are some people who love it and found it terrifying enough, there are also those who found it boring and not scary at all. Setting aside individual tastes in art, there's still a part of me that wonders if some of the film's critics didn't watch the movie as how it's recommended by many, in the dark, alone, and with noise-canceling headphones on. Then again, I don't know how much of an impact that would have on people who didn't like the film if they were to watch it a second time in that way, but nevertheless, I can see why these conditions are recommended in the first place. Most of this movie is quiet, and 95% of the dialogue is whispered. This movie, as subtle as it may seem, is packed with intent. Ball intentionally wanted to show a very specific kind of atmosphere, from the grainy imagery to the hushed tones of the children to the darkness and shadows we see on the screen. What we see and what we hear go hand in hand to evoke certain feelings he wanted the audience to feel. You see that sense of authenticity in Ball's choice to film Skinamarink entirely within his childhood home, where his parents still live to this day. And while filming, which only took 7 days, seemed to be quite easy and actually rather fun for the kids. It was actually the editing that proved to be the most time-consuming, taking more than 5 months to complete. Much of this time was spent focusing on perfecting the image quality and presentation Ball wanted by experimenting with different filters and color grading. And as for the title, which indeed comes from the song, came from Ball's childhood memory of the tune's rendition done by Sharon Lois and Bram. He was watching the classic Hollywood film Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, where there is a scene with some children singing the tune, which led to him discovering that the song is older than he thought. In fact, having its history traced as far back as 1910 with very different lyrics in the modern version, Ball naturally found the title fitting for his film, considering it's a nonsense word with the ability to bring about nostalgia in different ways for multiple generations. Now, with that background section out of the way, I just want to say moving forward that there are going to be major spoilers ahead for both Skinamarink and its precursor, Heck. I guess you could say I'll be spoiling the heck out of it. I'm sorry. Anyway, Skinamarink is available for streaming on Hulu and Shudder, and the link to Heck from the Bite-Sized Nightmares channel is in the description. I'm going to talk about what happens in both works and give you my analysis of them and what I think the underlying message is for the main film. The short film Heck, released in July 2020 on Bite-Sized Nightmares, serves as a proof of concept created prior to Skinamarink. From the beginning, we see from the perspective of a little boy waking up in the middle of the night, adjusting his eyes in the dark, focusing on his bedroom door ajar. At the same time, we hear a yet-to-be-seen television playing in another room. The boy gets up to look for his mom, and in her bedroom, he turns to look at the TV, playing an old cartoon. He goes downstairs, and in the living room, a TV is also playing an old cartoon. Still looking for his mom, it's revealed that the lights are broken, so he takes a flashlight and searches further around the house to no avail. He later appears to bust out the Legos and get to some doodling to pass the time. The next night, he appears to try searching around the house again for his mom, and the sneaking around the house in the dark felt realistically familiar to me. Many times whenever I've needed to get up in the middle of the night when I was a kid, whether to use the bathroom or get some water from the kitchen, there would be this thought deep within my mind that at any second, I could catch in the corner of my eye some kind of unknown scary thing in the darkness. Days pass lit only by the TV, playing old cartoons you could barely recognize, and we start to realize this boy is stuck in this perpetual setting of being alone and helpless. He seems to try various ways to get his mom's attention anyway, like cleaning his room, but then later coloring on the carpet. More days pass, and the boy, whose voice seems slightly more obscured than before, notes how quiet things have gotten. Then the most heartbreaking thing you could ever hear happens. At 65 days, trying again to find his mom, he goes upstairs while we also hear what sounds like muffled moaning or weeping. But as soon as the boy enters the room, it stops. And he finally finds her, but she's different. She says nothing, as she literally has no mouth. The length of time between days increase more and more as the short film continues. Skipping ahead to 461 days, we see the silhouette of the boy with his hair grown out very long, staring closely into the TV. It's as if it could be a potential portal, a possible way out of the current dimension he was in. Notably, at 872 days, the imagery has suddenly become a bit gruesome while still maintaining some ambiguity, as we see a hand twitching, but I'm unsure if it's still attached to anybody. And at 3,681 days, there are red and orange hues here with lines that look like they could be veins or something. Things are looking slightly bloody, but it's not clear how or who or what would be suffering. Finally, it's been 18,694 days, which is equivalent to around 50 years. That's a scary face, but who or what does it belong to? And the boy's voice is deeper now, implying he's aged, as he says this. A child trapped forever in liminal near-nothingness, with no escape, with a parent who is otherwise largely absent and cannot speak. Sounds like hell. So, what do we think happened? When it comes to films like these, taking the time to think over what we can gather from what we're given is a must. There is so much more to what we can barely see. This child is alone with a mom who is barely, if at all, present, and there's no mention or reference to a dad anywhere. What really gets me is when he reveals he has cancer, and it is around this time we see the only shot proving some kind of physical existence of his mother. With her mouth gone, it's as though she's been physically silenced in some way, whether by her own doing or from outside influence. Leading up to this shot, the boy hears what sounds like her muffled weeping from outside the room, like she could be grieving or something. Perhaps she merely doesn't know what to say, as her young son is literally sick with a terminal illness. She feels a lot of guilt, and I think her son can sense her sadness. I think when he is telling her he is getting better, it's to try and comfort her. That's my guess anyway. 50 years trapped in a personal, isolated hell. It made me think this could be some kind of purgatory afterlife for the boy, and that just made me ask why. And then I realized it's because no child should ever have to go through that. Like, fuck cancer, but childhood cancer can especially fuck all the way off. I don't have children, but I nevertheless cannot imagine seeing one of your own kids go through something like this. It truly sounds like a real hell for both the child and the parents. It's a real-life nightmare scenario, and Kyle Edward Ball nailed it with the subtlety and emotions in the atmosphere in this short film. The 50 years passing, I think, could be interpreted as perhaps the mother still remembering the child she once had, and the survivor's guilt she carried with her for a very long time after losing him. At the end, when we hear his voice for the last time, he's still the same little boy he once was so long ago, only still alive in his mother's mind. A memory tied to a subconscious with guilt and depression as darkness grows, as time moves forward. I guess to add to that, using surrealism to really dig and trying to interpret the film, it isn't necessary that the boy in the mother's mind is made up, but rather the soul of the boy lived on in her subconscious mind. Like, these could be her nightmares, reminding her of any guilt or any other negative emotion she could have buried deep after the loss of her son. She starts off dreaming about him frequently, but less and less as time passes. But every now and then, that guilt she felt would show up in her dreams. Considering it's about 40 years between the last scene and its predecessor, I guess you could say it's like a final dream. Perhaps the mother taking her own guilt with her to her own grave. So, since Skinamarink is a copyright film, I'm not going to be able to show you much footage besides what's in the trailer that's uploaded on YouTube. I'm also going to skip over some parts, so not only will I have to describe every detail of the film, but also for the sake of efficiency. What I really care about discussing are my personal interpretations of a unique piece of ultimately surrealistic and horrifying artwork. I do highly recommend watching both, or at least Heck, since it's not behind a subscription service paywall, so that you can follow along with at least some of my ramblings. Now, I ended up watching Skinamarink before I watched Heck, and then I ended up watching both again in order of release to really try and immerse myself into the shared atmosphere between the two. And specifically, I did so while doing, once again, as recommended, alone, in the dark, and with headphones on. Skinamarink's expansion on Heck's concept are obvious within its premise. It's nighttime, there's a TV playing old cartoons, and a small child cannot find their parent. But there are significant differences between the two works as well. This time the film follows two children, Kevin, who was 4 years old, and his older sister Kaylee, who was 6. Taking place in 1995, we start off seeing the children meet up in a hallway in the middle of the night. From the first sequence of the film, things flow kinda naturally, and I think it's one of the fastest sequences of the film. It gets straight to the point on establishing what's been normal for them up until the first shot of the film. In fact, after the opening credits where we see a floor covered in Legos, the lighting kinda looks like it's coming from daylight, like it could be the mid-afternoon. Nothing's gone wrong at all yet, except for the kids trying to figure out why their radio cassette player isn't working. The kids are just like any other kids who just want to play with their toys and their Legos all the time. A lot of the story in this film is told through sound, and from different angles of various spots in each room of the house. Volume changes between a TV in one room and another one elsewhere clues us into where everyone is. The children are upstairs, and Dad is downstairs in the living room, and then the TV turns off. And with some honestly strangely touching imagery, we see shots of framed photos of the children, including when they were babies. To me, we are still in the nothing weird or bad has happened yet part of the film. It gives off that nostalgia for a time when you were a kid, everyone is asleep, and the dark actually feels rather safe to you. In the dead of night, things start to slow down as we see a lengthy pan to Kevin's bedroom creaking open. We see him sitting in the hallway, and then we see him sitting at the top of the stairs. He whispers, "Are you hiding?" We hear him slowly count to 3, and then we hear some bumping sounds. A lamp switches on. Someone we don't see comes out into the hallway and turns on the light. It's Dad, and he can hear Kevin crying. He runs downstairs to find him, and suddenly a door is slammed shut and a car engine revs up from outside and drives away. The house is dead silent now, and there's this ominous slow pan around the living room. And after it stops at the TV, it switches back on. The picture is so bright you can't even tell what it is, but you can hear what sounds like music from a very old cartoon. Then, right as everyone returns home, the TV switches off. Upstairs, we hear Dad whisper Kaylee's name into her room as if he wanted to ask her something. Then we cut to a shot downstairs where Dad is speaking with someone on the telephone about what happened. Kevin indeed took a tumble down the stairs and hit his head. At some point, Dad says something about them not even needing to do stitches, making it sound as though Kevin's injuries weren't too serious. He also reveals Kaylee said he was sleepwalking. Later that night, Kevin gets up, goes to his dad's room, and he can't find him there, so he goes to get Kaylee. Then, a window beams in and out of existence. As the children begin to search the house for their father, the front door beams in and out of existence. By the way, I'm referring to it as beaming because that's the sound it makes when it happens. It honestly sounds like a sound effect from the original Star Trek series. Unable to find Dad anywhere, Kaylee calls 911. There's no ring. Kevin, probably a little on edge with a sense that they're alone, asks if they can sleep downstairs. They set up bedding on the couch, turn on the TV, and insert a VHS tape into the VCR. The opening credits of a very old cartoon begins to play. Kevin mentions he can't sleep with the lights on, and while we don't see it, it's implied that Kaylee gets up to turn the lights off. Then the next day begins, and we know this because Kaylee says she thinks it's time to get up. After breakfast, Kaylee goes upstairs to get some stuff. From the hallway, we hear her rummaging around in one of the rooms. We also see an interesting close-up of the hallway nightlight, which had been plugged in and turned on up until this point, was now unplugged on the floor. Perhaps thinking nothing of it, Kaylee plugs the light back in. She turns the hallway light off and then goes back downstairs. And a few seconds later, the hallway nightlight turns back off. Later that night, as they drift off to sleep, so do a couple of cartoon children on the TV as an enchanting lullaby tune jingles. We hear one of the kids get up. It's Kevin, and he's standing somewhere else in the house. We hear him whisper, "Why is Mom crying?" Well, we haven't heard a mention of Mom yet at all in this film, and we certainly don't hear anyone crying. Is Kevin sleepwalking again? Time passes, and the children start to wonder why they're alone and when are any adults going to show up? Their conversation is interrupted by a loud thumping, and then we see our first object on the ceiling, a wooden chair. So clearly by now, something's not right. And I think the children are aware of this, and Kaylee whispers they should probably stay quiet. Kevin asks again where Dad could be, and he says he wonders if he may be quote-unquote one with Mom. Kaylee says she doesn't want to talk about Mom, so begs the question, where is Mom? Well, we can't worry about that right now because Kevin just woke Kaylee up like, "You have to come see this." And it's because the toilet keeps blinking in and out of existence. I love it because it's kind of silly. Kevin is just like, where did it go? I think this moment is great because it fits as a sort of transitional piece between when things were just simply weird and when shit really hits the fan later on. Soon after, Kaylee goes into her room and looks around with a flashlight. She slowly looks up to find that her Barbie is on the ceiling. The children continue to pass time watching cartoons and playing with Legos. In the night, this time Kaylee is up, and a creepy voice in the shadows tells her to go upstairs. She creeps into her father's room, and we can see what looks like someone sitting at the side of the bed facing away. Could it be Dad? Whoever he is, he tells Kaylee to look under the bed. She looks, and there's nothing there. She tries again, and when she looks back up, Dad is gone, and across the bed, facing away from her, is Mom. Slowly, she tells Kaylee that she and her father love her and Kevin very much, and that she needs to close her eyes. She does, and when she reopens them, Mom is gone. I don't know if this was really Mom or not, but soon after this, we begin to hear the sounds of bones crunching. Kaylee is audibly nervous, and something creeps in from the darkness suddenly, so she screams and runs back downstairs. Kevin appears to have not noticed anything when she returns to the living room. Yet, now that they were beginning to realize that scary things were starting to happen, the kids move the couch to try and block off wherever that creepy voice originally came from. But it was to no avail, as later the voice calls for Kaylee again, and the next thing you know, Kevin wakes up wondering where she is. Now, he's all alone. At first, he tries to go about business as usual. After all, what else can he do? TV on and infinitely playing old cartoons, he colors and plays with Legos. Meanwhile, some of his toys are slowly becoming magnetized to the wall and ceiling. The creepy voice tells Kevin to go to the basement. There, he finds Kaylee in the dark, her voice muffled as he approaches her. I'm gonna say right now, this is my favorite scene in the whole movie. There's this surreal quality that plays into the creep factor really well as we hear Kaylee saying she's scared and feels strange. When Kevin finally sees her face, it's revealed she no longer has a mouth and her eyes are gone too, all covered over with skin. The jump scare used for this face reveal, the look of her literal blank expression with the sound effect used, all put together fits wonderfully for the scene. As someone who usually dislikes jump scares, I think this one was actually appropriately used and in a unique way that works for this film instead of resorting to mainstream methods. So here is where I'd like to pause to talk overall about Kaylee's character and some details we can pick up on based on the clues provided throughout the film. Now, it was hinted at earlier that Mom has been out of the picture for some time. Whether she passed away, disappeared, or something else, we don't really know. All we know is that Kaylee doesn't want to talk about her, as if thinking of her conjures some kind of negative emotion. Going back to one of the moments we see Kevin sleepwalking and he whispers, "Why is Mom crying?" Well, was he dreaming of a memory he has of her? From what I can interpret, I think it's implied that she did pass away. Besides Kevin's memory of her crying, there aren't really that many clues that give away how she passed exactly. Personally, I think it may have been at her own hands. The only thing I really have to back up that theory is the scene where Kaylee finds one of her Barbies stuck to the ceiling. The angle of the shot makes the placement of the doll appear as though it's hanging. I'll let you fill in the blanks on that one. Now, could the mom we see in Skinamarink even be the mom? Or is it just this creepy, unseen entity messing with Kaylee? Because I certainly don't think the voice we hear in that scene that sounds like Dad is actually Dad. I think that for sure is the entity. Considering it's established that Mom has not been in the picture at all for some time, that's certainly not her true physical body we see, her back turned while speaking with Kaylee. That could be the influence of the entity too. I certainly wouldn't put it past it to try to lure Kaylee to some kind of false sense of security using her mother's voice and appearance. And as we get further into the second half of the film, we really see just how cruel this thing is, just how sinister. My only question is, how did the entity know what Mom's voice sounded like? You know, I think maybe it's both. Maybe the mom we see is really meant to be her, but the entities definitely manipulated her projected appearance. Going back to Kaylee, there's something I want to get a little deeper into, something I really notice about her character. It's established that she is Kevin's older sister. She's 6 years old. Pretty soon after they find themselves really alone in the house, Kaylee is quick to try and make responsible decisions to try and take care of both of them. She tries calling 911, she feeds them, and is overall taking on quite a responsible role for how small she is. In the scene when she says she doesn't want to talk about Mom, she sounds so sad in a tired sort of way that's just honestly rather heartbreaking. I think Kaylee may have been really close and attached to her mom, so her loss may have affected her deeply. Because she got to spend a little more time with her than Kevin did, whatever the circumstances are that surrounds her absence has probably left a greater impact on her. So thinking about this, I can see why she was able to understand that this whole thing with things getting weird around the house and seeing what each child has seen would mean whoever or whatever is behind all this is malevolent. She wanted to protect them from it. She understood what was happening was scary and not good, and thus the entity silences her. And while the last established appearance of her implies that she's alive, just now with a literal blank face, we don't know what exactly happens to her going forward. Later we see a shot of the back of someone's head with longish hair, but I'm not sure if that's supposed to be Kaylee or the mom. Anyway, I think Kaylee is a really good older sister character in terms of a reality a lot of big sisters have. Unfortunately, there are some families out there with an eldest daughter who ended up as an additional caretaker of her younger siblings, like a motherly role stemming from the absence of the real mom or even both parents, physically or emotionally. So not necessarily because a parent passed away, but because one or both parents are just not present for some reason. Now, as the big sister of my immediate family, I was lucky to have not had this experience. Like, I was thankfully allowed and encouraged to just be a kid, but I've heard stories of these sort of things happening. For now, let's move on. Later, Kevin hears his voice being spoken in the darkness of the hallway nearby, clearly by the entity, who then essentially knocks Kevin out by merely saying the word sleep. The TV changes from a cartoon to a transitional screen, almost resembling an eye blinking slowly. A scene from a different cartoon plays, a pre-Bugs Bunny cartoon from the 1930s called Presto Chango. We see a white rabbit standing in a large vase teasing a dog. It fakes the dog out by doing various tricks to distract it from its own alertness at the rabbit's presence. Just when the dog starts to get really mad, the TV pauses. We see more shots of Kevin's toys that are still scattered about on the floor, and then the cartoon resumes, this time showing the rabbit once again distracting a dog by making itself disappear. And then the TV repeats that specific bit of animation over and over again. Then, right after another toy disappears, it stops and seemingly returns to the cartoon it was playing before, and then Kevin wakes up. The entity whispers, "I want to play." And Kevin seems to try to ignore it, continuing with his Legos. But the entity doesn't like being ignored. It says, "I want to play again," much more threateningly. And when Kevin ignores it again, the entity puts him back to sleep and angrily resumes the loop of the rabbit, making itself disappear over and over again. Soon enough, fear starts to set in more with Kevin as the entity escalates its demands. And without giving it away, while we don't exactly see what happens, things start getting bloody. But Kevin each time would be told to just wake up again. The playing with the Legos resume, and so do the cartoons, mocking Kevin at this point as the picture and sound increasingly warps before the TV completely turns off. Time passes, and miraculously, there's suddenly the sound of a dial tone in the distance. Kevin immediately goes to call 911, and this time he actually gets an answer. He tells the dispatcher he's alone and got hurt from a knife, and now he feels sick. While the dispatcher is really sweet and assures him grown-ups are on the way, Kevin tells him where he is, downstairs. But the doors are gone. Kevin drops the phone and turns on the flashlight. There, that Fisher-Price toy telephone every 90s preschooler knew and loved has shown up. Its phone off the hook and on the floor. Its eyes below the receiver, staring upward. "You did that," Kevin says. The entity laughs demonically in the darkness. Help isn't coming. Soon after, we hear the sound of static that's been ever present throughout the film build up really intensely and then suddenly stop. Kevin asks, "How did you do that?" And the entity says it can do anything, and reveals in its own words what happened to Kaylee. "Kaylee didn't do as she was told. She wanted her mom and dad. So I took her mouth away." Then the entity tells Kevin to go upstairs. He complies, and the entity furthers its level of manipulation by telling the audibly frightened Kevin that it'll protect him. Also, Kevin is just on the ceiling now. At least that's the perspective we're now given. The ceiling is now the floor, and the floor is now the ceiling. Told to continue further down the hallway, Kevin does so and enters the room at the end, where he really ends up stepping into an abyss. The door getting far away from him as his whispered voice echoes, asking if he can go back. When he turns his flashlight back on, we see the hallway, now covered in toys on the ceiling that was once the floor. And ominously, text appears that simply says 572 days. The hallway is endless, stretches on and on. The sound of a cartoon playing distorts and warps, and the further away we get from that end of the hallway, it turns into a haunting echo of ghostly sounds until Kevin clicks the flashlight back off and everything stops. Like the boy in Heck, Kevin is trapped in a limbo, but this time it's different. As we hear the last portion of the film, it's become obvious that Kevin's existence is now fully in the hands of whatever entity this is. It can knock him out, but it can also bring him back. We casually see Mom sitting away from us on the bed again, distantly, and she gradually fades away in the darkness. The single shot of the exterior of the house is shown to us, far and away in this distant nowhere of nothingness, save for the echoes of an old cartoon VHS playing on the TV. In another terrifying sequence, Kevin quietly turns the flashlight on and off at various points in the house until he finds Mr. Fisher-Price's phone, which I think the entity might be inhabiting. Its eyes are looking up, and then it stares straight at us, its eyes visible still after Kevin clicks the flashlight off. We see our final montage of family photos, and no one has a proper face anymore. Some people's heads are completely missing. As the entity continues its eternal torture on this family, we are led to the final scene. After another shot of demonic violence on loop, Kevin is back in the living room, and we hear him ask Kaylee if they could watch something happy. Then, as we get closer and closer to a lonesome white door in the dark, melodic, albeit distorted lullaby music can be heard. Through the door, I think we're back in Kevin's bedroom, and in the dark, on the ceiling, we begin to just barely make out a white face telling Kevin to go to sleep. Kevin asks twice, "What's your name?" But there's no answer. The face stares back in silence and thus concludes the film, quietly, and leaving many viewers with many questions. Okay, so one thing about this movie is that it's very, very interpretable. Kyle Edward Ball stated in an interview that his priority when making the film was the feeling and atmosphere, with the plot itself being secondary. From what I've seen when researching for this video, he seemed to enjoy reading about other people's interpretations for his film, which is pretty cool. Well then, here's mine. So before I outright say what I think this is about, let's call back again to Heck, specifically the two characters, the boy and the mom, and what I think they represent. The boy reveals at one point that he has cancer. The only time we see the mom, she has no mouth. I think with the emphasis on nightmares, darkness, and fear seen across both works, it's most likely that Heck and Skinamarink are told from the perspective from someone in each piece. Now, Heck does get a little more ambiguous about who, especially considering all the time jumps that occur and the likelihood, in my opinion, that at some point the boy as we see him is merely his representation in perhaps his mother's mind. If 50 or more years have passed since losing him, Mom here could be thinking of him again as she grows old, remembering all the guilt she harbored for so long. But in Skinamarink, I think the majority of the film is told from Kevin's own mind. I think we're literally seeing inside his subconscious, especially after the incident in the beginning. As I mentioned earlier, things start off like a normal evening for the family. Dad's watching TV downstairs, the kids are upstairs, then at bedtime the TV goes off and everyone's in their rooms until Kevin is sitting out in the hallway. Everything starts to change after Kevin's accident. He hit his head, and while he may have seemed fine at first, if you hit your head hard enough in a certain way, some results of a traumatic brain injury can actually take some time to start being noticeable. I'm not a doctor or nurse or involved in the medical industry in any way, so what I'm telling you is based on my research from actual reputable sources. So yes, I think Kevin experienced a TBI, and as we see throughout the film, his symptoms are simultaneously gradually worsening over the course of nearly 2 years. It's no secret how complex and actually kind of mysterious brains are. Like, in my opinion, the fact that we can dream and have rapid eye movement and sometimes sleepwalk or sleep talk or experience sleep paralysis is actually so insane to me. Like, we're the aliens. We've been the aliens this whole time. I mean, not literally, but hey, I'm from Pluto. What I'm getting at are that symptoms of a TBI can show up in many different ways and many different combinations. This includes hallucinations and memory loss and loss of consciousness, among many others. And sometimes it can be fatal, even if it takes time. I don't necessarily want to get detailed with the medical facts since I'm not qualified, like, at all. I have artsy-fartsy doo-doo brain. Nevertheless, I left some links to some sources in the description in case you're interested. With Skinamarink, I definitely see a pattern in and comparing the events that occur throughout the film with some of the symptoms and possible results that can occur after a TBI, whether it's a cerebral contusion or something else. The dad gone missing, Kaylee losing some of her facial features, parts of the house beginning to disappear, and darkness continuing to grow and grow. I think this is where the most horrifying aspect of the film lies, and the reality that we don't see, but can only imagine after thinking about it for a little while. I think the entity is Kevin's TBI, and is also his Grim Reaper. Something else I noticed throughout the film is often when we see a cartoon play on the TV, it kind of matches with what's happening in the scene it's in. I think the entity actually uses it as a foreshadowing tool that the audience can pick up on. In a way, it makes us, the viewers, a part of its game by subtly communicating through presto changeo. It knows its cruel nature is the point of its role, and so it taunts anyone it can through the multiple dimensions it can access. As for outside the TV, a lot of what we see certainly could have been dreams, or rather nightmares Kevin has over time. It's also possible he could have fallen into a coma at some point. Here is my ultimate theory, in timeline order, of what is happening to Kevin after his accident. In the first few hours afterwards, the entity starts to creep in very subtly. Back at the hospital, since Dad later says he's fine, the doctor probably at most diagnosed him with a mild concussion or something like that. If so, then they didn't realize the severity of Kevin's injury because it may not have looked obvious on the outside. Kevin starts having dreams that his dad is missing and that he and Kaylee are alone. In his mind, as the effects of the injury begin to slowly intensify, his reoccurring dreams start blending in with reality. It's possible that his sleepwalking patterns have increased. There may have also been times where he seemed confused and he may have begun to have memory problems. And eventually, dreamland starts to take over. Things that happen in his dream, he begins to hallucinate while awake. And when he dreams, he occasionally dreams of the pain he feels every now and then in his head. And then the shadows in these dreams expand and grow, and memories start echoing in the distance, until eventually, while one face laughs maniacally in victory, another looks down upon him, like a full moon, Earth's orbiting mythological symbol of the mother. And when it says to go to sleep, Kevin's childlike wonder is still being preserved in some way, as he asks for its name. Although a lot of what we see in Skinamarink is symbolic, including the entity as some kind of representation of Kevin's journey to the shortened end of his life after his head injury, nothing takes away from the fact that it is a monster. It's cruel because a fatal condition for an innocent child is a cruel thing to occur. While I think Ball's intent to have the film feel like a nightmare being described by a child succeeds in adding an extra layer to its meaning. Hell, multiple layers. Kevin's mind, that of a 4-year-old, is trying to make sense of the world in some way, and after everything that has happened in his family during his short life, it may seem to him like the world is full of unknowns, and some of those unknowns are really bad. There can be confusing, painful, traumatizing, damaging things you can experience. Perhaps Kevin could sense the underlying sadness festering within his house, from the moment he remembers his mom crying to whenever she was no longer there, to even where he is now at the conclusion of the film. Kevin's journey alongside the dangerous growth of the entity's influence could also reflect his perception of what's going on in his life. Let's say as his side effects from the TBI gradually increase its hold on him, Kevin could start feeling confusion and frustration. Since he is such a small child with a limited understanding of the world, he has become utterly helpless at a time when he should be allowed ample room to gain his growing self-awareness and survival skills. So what if Kevin isn't actually dying? I would still think the events of the films are the result of his injury. It's another possibility he may have slipped into a coma, either way dealing with the effects of the TBI for a long time, if not the rest of his life. Regardless, this incident could have really shaken the family up a bit, considering they already dealt with the loss of the mom. Hello, Editing Jamie here, barefaced and wearing a Snuggie ripoff, and I'm here to add to that theory I just told you. So let's go back again to the mom and her theoretical passing by her own hands. I'm not saying the actual S word because, you know, apparently YouTube's a little strict on those things. So what if this film is about grief more than we realize? It's just interesting to me to think about it. Feel free to do this, but you don't have to, considering it's obviously a heavy, sensitive subject. And put yourself, if you would like, in either Kevin or Kaylee's shoes, and you lost a parent that young, when you are constantly learning, bit by bit, with your ever growing brain. You are still so young and still have so much to learn. And you witness the effects after this event occurs. The emotional effects on not just yourself, but the rest of the family as well. Remember, Dad is the one that goes missing first. He knew Mom the longest. When he disappears, it's very quick and suddenly. And when we do see him again, well, it's not really him. Or is it? Is it possible that the entity is not only a harbinger of death, but also a representation of the effects of death on others? Could the entity's actions be symbolic of the effects of grief from losing a loved one? Later in the film, Kaylee has some significant scenes involving Mom, or at least references to her. And then later, we literally hear her say that she's scared and confused. She misses her mom. She was so close with her mom. She loved her mom. She misses her mom and she's scared. She is still a ever-growing child because now she only has one parent to rely on, and she's already taken on responsibilities to help take care of her little brother, who is just 2 years younger than her. Kevin is being introduced at a very young age, this kind of tragedy and grief. He has no idea what to make of it. He has no idea the deeper meaning of it. At first, he was probably just like, oh, okay, I guess. Probably sad too, of course. I wonder if he had been so young when it happened, he doesn't really remember that much of her. Thus, we don't directly see him in an emotionally impacted state when it comes to it. Instead, we just see his ever-growing mind of a 4-year-old be faced with this concept that just may kind of be almost unbelievable to him and his mind. Like, I remember whenever I was a little girl, and I went to a funeral for the first time. I think it was for one of my great-grandparents. And even though I didn't really have that many memories of this ancestor and didn't really see him too much throughout my short life at that point, being hit with that life lesson that life eventually comes to an end just naturally made me sad. And I think Kevin might be learning a really big and unfortunate life lesson about sadness by facing it so early on in his life. Now, I'm not saying that the whole movie is just a metaphor for grief. I still think that his head injury did have a play in all this. It's just that now, not only does he have to deal with the effects of suffering this head injury, but it's still while his other family members in the house are still grieving the loss of their mom. Like I said earlier, they were probably a little shaken up by the incident and had a moment where they were afraid that they were going to lose Kevin. It's starting to honestly make me lean toward more Kevin isn't dead by the end of the film after all. Maybe slipped into a coma? Possibly. So yeah, just an additional nugget of theory analysis of the film. You know, I have an additional layer to one aspect of my theory. Kaylee's story in the film is her own interaction with the entity, or its representations. As a little girl who has already gone through enough loss in her life and is so close to caring toward her little brother, I think it's possible she's the one who can pick up the most on what's going on with Kevin. After all, she is the one who initially sees him sleepwalking. And if she senses whatever it is that's happening in real life with Kevin, it could be causing her some concern and confusion as well, especially as things worsen. The whole thing could have her being reminded of whatever happened to Mom in the first place. If she were to lose her brother too when she's still just a little girl, I just can't imagine what she must feel to have experienced grief so grand at such a young age. The house that holds this family remembers all. So we not only see Kevin's subconscious, but Kaylee's as well. And with such heavy subject matter, it's no wonder she's terrified and wants her parents, wants her safety and her sense of normalcy back. Skinamarink is pretty terrifying in my opinion, and really well done and clever in its execution. It's also really sad and can leave you thinking about certain parts of the films for hours or even days. All in all, I think the film forces you to come up with your own theory. That's the beauty of asking, what did I just see? Whether it's a scary movie or a strange thing you may have seen in the dark yourself, Perhaps in the corner of the room, you could have swore you saw something move. Think also of your bed, often the most secure feeling place you can be in, but can also be the most terrifying. If you've ever had sleep paralysis, which the final scene in Skinamarink also reminds me of, as Kevin sees this face staring down at him from high above, as he succumbs to his own personal hell. Right now, Kyle Edward Ball is working on his second film, which apparently is going to be released under A24, and apparently has Elijah Wood included as a producer, so I'm very curious as to what it'll end up being. I know I'll be wanting to watch it as soon as it's released. What I really like about what I've seen of his work so far is this great what did I watch energy to them. There's a certain kind of beauty to not just art, but even random occurrences that make you ask that. If you open your mind to certain kinds of mysteries in art, get yourself comfy for them, you might just find some things that really alter your perspective on things in life along the way.
At the end of the day, I just want them to have watched something that will stick with them, right? A horror movie that they'll be thinking of years from now, right? And whatever interpretation people have or whatever the movie makes them feel, that is the correct interpretation and the correct feeling, because it doesn't matter what I wanted them to feel or what I wanted them to interpret it as, because it's not my movie anymore. It's their movie, right?
Thank you so much for watching my review of the film Skinamarink. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more content like this, feel free to check out my other videos on my channel, and please consider subscribing, because there will be more videos like this in the future. I got a long list of video ideas, and I'm just getting started, so any support I get from viewers, I 1000% appreciate. So thank you. For now, I think I'm going to turn it in on my home dwarf planet. I'm Jamie from Pluto. See you next time.